Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and I'm afraid disabled people continue to be in the political firing line. We're used to these dinosaurs wanting women to be kept cloistered, but are Reform UK branching out to insisting that disabled people, regardless of gender, should not be allowed out of the house either? A Reform UK activist certainly seems to think this is what their party are suggesting. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So Zia Yusuf was jumping on the Motability bandwagon this week, the grant used to help disabled people, with adaptations for vehicles where transport's a problem for them. Now, I'll talk more about the politics of that where the upcoming budget is concerned later in this video, because, I don't think it's good news. But I thought I'd begin with Reform UK's general stance on disabled people first. See, Zia Yusuf begins by trying to put people off the idea of Motability, by pointing to the fact it's not means tested, which is absolutely true, but he's trying to get people to think that the scheme therefore is awash with idle millionaires all scrounging off the system. No, mate, those are the people donating to Reform UK. However, there's data on this. 42% of recipients are on a household income of less than £10,000. Another 42% between that figure and £18,000. Even that is much less than the minimum wage for a full-time worker. The vast majority of people in need of Motability are in poverty. There may be the odd person on a decent income who also gets it. It's the odd person. I mean, who would have guessed that being disabled is actually a barrier to good income? Oh, would you believe it? Disabled people generally have much lower incomes than people on average. Who'd have thunk it? Not Reform UK at any rate. Also, Yusuf is implying that Motability gives you a free car here. It doesn't. Doesn't pay for your car. The average grant is worth less than £3,500. It's not to buy you a car, right? It's not. £3,500 ain't getting you a brand new Audi, is it, mate? Yet another example of Reform UK being terrible at financial calculations. Putting these guys in charge of the economy is going to turn us into Argentina. But I'll come back to this. But what I then wanted to comment on, this is what drew my attention to it. Someone posted this. Thank you, Joe. There was a Reform UK activist jumping on Yusuf's already misleading comments and then adding further misleading comments, I think probably because they just don't understand what he's talking about. So he started talking about the blue badge. Now, just to be clear, the blue badge has got nothing to do with Motability. Motability is for people who need adjustments to a car in order to be able to drive it safely, right? Blue badge is for when a car needs to park in disabled parking spaces because someone in the car, might not even be the driver, has difficulty moving distances unaided. If I were to drive a disabled person, I don't have a blue badge. They've got a blue badge. If I were to drive them to the shops and they need to go to the shops with me, well, I'll park in the disabled bay. They'll use their blue badge, right? That's what it's for. It's for the person, not the car. They're both schemes for disabled people, and there will be crossover, of course, but they're not strictly the same thing. Some people may need Motability to be able to drive, but when they get out of the car, they can walk perfectly well because that's not their disability. But anyway, they also suggest that the blue badge is being abused because they've seen so-called Motability cars parked outside pubs with the permit in the screen. Now, two things here. The first is I'm guessing they have no idea what a Motability car is because they're conflating it with the blue badge, right? Not everyone with a blue badge has Motability and vice versa. Secondly, how is it an abuse of the blue badge for it to be displayed outside a pub? As long as they haven't given it to their mate to go to the pub, as long as there's a disabled person is there. Are disabled people not allowed to go to the pub? Are they supposed to only use their car or be driven to go to and from like work or the shops, and the rest of the time they've got to be locked in the dungeon so they don't bother anyone? Reminded me of that one. I'm sure many of you have seen it from years ago. Do you remember this one? Someone having a pop at disabled parking spaces being enforced beyond 6 p.m. and having to be told that by a disabled person that, we're not werewolves. We're allowed out at night. Reform UK are just a deeply unserious party, aren't they? They jump from bandwagon to bandwagon, shouting and screaming in order to mislead people into being outraged at problems that are either overblown or just don't exist at all. But why are they suddenly talking about Motability? I mean, that's an odd one, isn't it? Especially as they seem to know nothing about it. Well, the Treasury have been leaking various possible tax and spending fixes ahead of the budget in order to gauge public opinion. It's how it works. It's quite common. You've got couple of tough decisions to make. You leak it to the papers, they will happily publish it. If there's a major backlash, you deny ever having considered it. And if it seems to be quite mooted, you go, yeah, I might do that. And one of them is a cut to the Motability budget. Now, I don't know whether that would be a reduction in the available grant or a reduction in the number of people qualifying, but it's a severe cut either way. Now, we don't know it's happening, but given that I've just said the vast majority of people in receipt are on less than a full-time minimum wage income equivalent, this is going to be not a great policy if it's implemented. So why are the government doing it? Well, the simple answer is there are no great options. It's very difficult for me to be absolutely certain because I don't have access to their internal polling, but we can surmise from general polling. I've said in the past, sometimes I know they're getting their internal polling wrong because it contradicts the general polling. But where it doesn't, where it's in line with the general polling, I can sort of go, yeah, they will have even more information. And I've said this before, key swing voters basically resent welfare spending. Now, in good times, nobody really minds, right? Because your taxes are reasonably even keel, public spending's there, there's no great pressure on the budget. But the current national situation is dire. The Labour government are trying to boost public investment in order to grow the economy, right? Without investment, you're not going to get growth. The economy is not going to grow on its own. Investment, by the way, which has been completely absent for the previous 14 years before they won power. The cost of doing it keeps going up and up as well. Remember, Reeves set her budget last October. That was supposed to be it. The reason it needs revising is mostly because of the global trade situation worsening with Trump's tariffs. The cost of borrowing has increased. When Reeves inherited the largest national debt we've ever had and then had to borrow more to get that investment, well, if borrowing costs rise more, that hurts even more, right? And the public do understand that the country's finances are tight. And because people think of national finances as being the same as household finances, they're not. But it really doesn't matter how much economists stamp their feet about it and complain about the conflation. It is how the public see it. So if your household finances are stretched, you don't just go, oh, well, I'll just earn more money then. I'll earn more money. Because everyone would love to do that even if your finances weren't stretched, right? So realistically, you look for some unnecessary spending to cut. That's what you do. Well, these key voters expect the government to do the same. And like I say, they resent any welfare spending that they don't get the benefit of. And Labour's key voters, they don't get the benefit of it. You know, they're basically working age. They don't get the state pension. Yes, we know Labour can't piss off the state, those in receipt of the state pension either. But nonetheless, that's not their key voter. Their key voters aren't by and large disabled or unemployed or, even on especially low incomes. So the welfare bill is seen as the fat to cut when times are tough by these voters. It's for this reason that looking at public attitude polling and what Rachel Reeves has been saying, I think the government's own internal polling is telling them that their voters demand a reduction in the welfare bill before they will accept the need for tax rises. Because we know there's going to need to be tax rises. Rachel Reeves isn't going to chop all that investment because then the economy is just not going to grow. You might as well just, have a party till the next election and then lose it, right? The economy must grow, right? Living standards must go up. They need the investment. Tax rises are going to have to cover the gap that's appeared this year. But she's got to sell those to the public. Reeves can't really hit businesses again. They're too fragile beyond the fact that they're announcing now another above inflation increase to the national minimum wage. They're belly aching about that. I might talk about that tomorrow again. So basically, Reeves is limited in where those tax rises can fall. So in order to sell them, particularly if she has to sell some tax rises that are going to hit people that they'd previously promised wouldn't be hit, she's going to have to do her best to at least say she's cutting costs, right? It's a bit like, let's say you've got a kid who's just they've left home and, and they're running into money problems. You go, okay, I'll give you a couple £100 or something like that, tide you over. You at least want to know that they're not blowing it all on parties. Do you know what I mean? You don't mind helping someone out a bit as long as you know that they're doing their bit at their end. Basically, I think Labour's polling is showing them, because they know who their key voters are, they're showing them that they have to cut welfare spending somewhere. In my view, there is no real waste in welfare spending right now. I don't believe the Tories develop wasting it. Yes, I know people will constantly give me, oh, I know this person or my cousin does this. There will be some people in the system who are getting some money and they don't strictly need it. Yeah, there are some people playing it. Some. It's not necessarily on a large scale, or certainly not a large enough scale to make a difference. And even if it is, even if it, let's say it were, it's like, well, how would you root it out though? That would actually potentially cost more than what you're saving. Because like, how would you weed out the small number of people who may not need a particular thing that they're qualifying for? You know, you'd need to scrutinise each application more expertly and in more detail. Well, that would mean massively boosting the officials in the DWP. But that is what I think is happening here. I think the government, I think they know that there's no real waste in the welfare system, really, that you can cut. Nothing easy. But I think that they are certain that their voters need them to make a show of cutting welfare in order to sell the tax rises. I think that's the political reality. Some token cut to spending so that they can say, we are actually, we are asking for more from you, but we are spending very efficiently. And I also think that is right based on the available evidence. So they will attempt to cut it where they think it would be the least painful. Now, I don't know where that would be, or whether Labour will exercise better judgment in where it is than they did with the winter fuel and PIP, because that was all born of the same thing. They misjudged that badly. But I do think something is going to be cut, because I think they need it to sell the other adjustments in the budget to their key voters. Voters who are being misled and further misled by the likes of Reform UK, completely misrepresenting what these schemes do with no pushback from the media. They're not going to cut the state pension. That's the largest chunk of welfare spending. They're not going to cut universal credit, which is next. They're actively boosting spending on child benefit directly and indirectly. And they are actually also boosting disability spending in other areas as well, including PIP. Remember, the issue with PIP was not that they were cutting the amount you would get. They were boosting the amount. It was that they were stopping some people getting it at all, or wanted to. Now they can't. So it is a tough one. And someone is going to be sacrificed here. Because although some welfare spending is not means tested, the process of doing so is absolutely fraught, as the government found out last year. And I do think it's probably going to fall on disabled people somewhere. That being said, I will point out the budget is also boosting incomes in other ways as well. There's another above inflation boost to the minimum wage being announced, as I say. I'm going to discuss that a bit more detail tomorrow. But still. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.